A very warm welcome to everyone. I'm Zsófia Banuta, co-founder and director of Unhacked Democracy, a pro-democracy group with a focus on Central Europe. We are co-hosting this event with our Hungarian partner, the Civil College Foundation, CKA. So before we begin, another reminder that we are recording this event, and for those who wish Hungarian interpretation, please click on the interpretation globe icon at the bottom. Ha valaki magyar szinkrontolmácsolással szeretné hallgatni a webinárt, akkor kérem válassza ki a magyar nyelvű csatornát a jobb alsó sarokban, ahol látja a földgomb ikont, és and we kindly ask everybody to put their full name in the tagline so we can identify you. Kérek mindenkit, hogy írja ki a teljes nevét, hogy lássuk, hogy kik azok, akik csatlakoznak hozzánk. So in the first half of the event, we will hear from our two distinguished guest speakers. And in the second half, you will be able to ask your questions. Please type them in the chat box in English or in Hungarian, and we will try to keep our event to an hour. But if there are loads of questions, then we can extend it by a few minutes. So let's begin. Civil society is often seen as a force for democracy and human rights, but Ukraine has shown us that in times of war, it can also be a pillar of security. Today, EU leaders are in crisis mode for an emergency summit to raise hundreds of billions of euros for European defense and to achieve and safeguard a just peace for Ukraine. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said Europe was facing a clear and present danger on a scale that none of us have seen in our adult lifetime. This is an absolutely massive moment, and we are at crossroads in history. Europe cannot rely on the United States, first time since the end of World War II, and we all need to change our mindset. We in civil society need to draw inspiration from the courage and resilience of Ukrainians who have sacrificed an enormous amount to preserve our collective way of life. Defending freedom is a collective effort that requires all citizens, not only the army and the government. But what made Ukraine's civil society resilient enough to help defend the country? How decentralization and civic engagement are shaping Ukraine's resistance, and what lessons can other civil society leaders learn from Ukraine's experience? This is a very intense and busy time, and we really appreciate you taking time out to talk to us today. Our two distinguished guests, let's hear from them today, joining us live from Ukraine, Oleh Rybachuk and Oleh Rybachuk. And let me introduce you Oleg first. He is a Ukrainian statesman and a public figure with expertise in European integration. He was a member of the Ukrainian Parliament between 2002 and 2005, Vice Prime Minister for European Integration in 2005, and head of the Secretariat of President Viktor Yushchenko between 2005 and 2006. Since leaving government, Oleg has co-founded the analytical and advocacy organization Center of United Actions and is one of the initiators of the New Citizens Campaign and CHESNO movement. Thank you, Oleg, for joining us, and the floor is yours. What can other civil society leaders learn from Ukraine's experience?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I remember when I resigned from top government jobs and moved into civil society, I was hoping to find partners in Europe I was believing that there must be similar organizations which are facing similar problems as we are in Ukraine. And frankly, I couldn't find them, because in normal democratic societies, civil organizations are busy with something very different mostly than we are in Ukraine, because you have well-established political parties. But mostly what we are doing in Ukraine, we have to do something which our non-functioning practically parties are not doing. So much of our energy and of our attention goes to uh, defending democracy, fighting corruptions, taking care of human rights, and many, many other issues. But I would say that I would look back at my personal experience, that something which is called, it's like cliche, vibrant civil society in Ukraine, it manifested itself after Euromaidan, or students' revolution, or revolution of dignity, as they say it. When Yanukovych, an obvious dictator, came to power, and he wanted to crash all democratic movements, and to establish his absolute rule in the country. Why I am saying so? Because I will never forget, I was very active at Orange Revolution, but that time I was member of parliament, and that was politically led revolution. But Euromaidan started from kids, from students, after a rumor was there that our president Yanukovych was intending not to sign association agreement with EU, and we suddenly realized that we may lose European perspective. And I will never forget those kids. I was there at Maidan all night, kind of acting as a certain security guarantor, because police knew me, Secret Service knew me, so I could somehow protect those kids, students who've been there. But I remember how idea of why we must be there emerged, that students have been saying, if our president refuses to sign association agreement with EU, and nothing happens in Ukraine, we are silent, it means we don't care. It means we will be forgotten. It means we'll lose that European perspective. And that was very genuine. And you could see school children coming there, asking their parents to come every day to demonstrate that it's very important for us to see that perspective. And after the war, full-scale war happened, we already had this very active civil society. And as you know, democracy shows itself in time of most crisis and danger. Therefore, when full-scale operation was there, the full-scale war took place, the civil society responded immediately. My center, we conducted a broad research after February 22. We made 193 interviews in 14 different regions of Ukraine, where we've been researching what kind of civic initiatives appeared there. And you will be so much surprised how many initiatives, immediate, very effective, how different communities. We talked to religious leaders, we talked to local communities, we talked to everybody in the regions, and we registered so many initiatives which were very helpful. They've been aiming to help. If you are in the Western Ukraine, they've been providing shelters for those people who are moving from the cities under attack. We saw many initiatives to collect money to support the army. We saw lots of initiatives to provide medical assistance, to provide even psychological help, to provide shelters for animals which were left or which were traveling with with people. So you could see just a blossom of initiatives, and which is very important. People were not asking for this. If before that, mostly civil society could be described by some structurized initiatives like organizations or movements, the whole country became civil society. People did not bother to register or to have formal status. They've been simply helping each other and taking a lot of a burden of the central government, which was at shock. And if the civil society would not provide this assistance, which was happening in every small village or town, everywhere, all over Ukraine, where central government got a chance to really take care of very important decisions, not being distracted by numbers of problems Ukrainian citizens were facing during the war. So the reaction of Ukrainian civil society, I would be winding up, during the war shows that civil society can not only protect human rights and freedoms, but in times of crisis, in times of threat, it can really take or contribute a lot to the security and even national defense, because lots of first battalions, when Russian attacked Ukraine in 2014, went from Euromaidan. They've been volunteers, so they've been Ukrainian citizens were acting as volunteers, defending the country. Those who were not at the front lines did a lot to make country more safe and to do a lot of things which central government simply could not because of number of reasons. And another maybe very important conclusion for others, even in times of war, there could be a balance between democracy, security, and defending people's rights and freedoms. And even if there is a war and there is a curfew like in Ukraine, military curfew, lots of freedoms are remained and protected in our country. The government should not use the instrument to use a foreign and external threat as the excuse for reducing freedoms and taking away people's rights. So there could be this balance between security and democracy. And Ukraine shows that even in time of very bloody war, we managed to preserve basic human rights, basic freedoms, and preserve our dignity.
Thank you so much for this amazing presentation. We'll come back to you with some questions. I'm sure there are many follow-up questions. There's a lot of food for thought here. Next up is Olga Ivazovska, who is the chairwoman of Civil Network Opera. She's an international election expert and led observation missions in Ukraine with over 25,000 activists since 2010. Olga represented Ukraine in the political subgroup of the trilateral contact group between Ukraine, Russia, and the OSCE, settling the conflict in eastern Ukraine between 2016 and 2018. She was named among the country's top 100 influential and successful women by Ukrainian magazines, and she co-founded the International Center for Ukrainian Victory following Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. Olga, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm happy to be here. At the same time, I don't have fairy tales for you about resilience. Resilience, like democracy, is not a state of being, it's a process of becoming. We have to work on it on a daily basis. Ukrainians doesn't have a special DNA for being more resilient as you are, or more resilience as other people in, I don't know, Asia. It's about our practices, and it's about our, beliefs that what we are doing, it's about values, not that values which we are speaking about, but those which we are fighting for. And if you really believe that freedoms does matter, that then you will try to do something when you will see that it's under the dangers because of your government or foreign government or neighbor, like Russia is for us now a huge problem. But when whole world is not in secured place now because nobody knows how the war in Ukraine will end, I can just share my experience and my organization, what is the top priority and what can be, step-by-step reality if you want to change something. I am not very young person already. I didn't participate only in one revolution on granite, because I was too young there. At the same time, revolutions doesn't mean that you have to go to the streets each day and all the time, because it's not productive. At the same time, if you will not go to the streets when your own government are not democratic, it's mean that you will lose a voice. If you don't have other voices, like via media, civil society organizations, and so on and so forth, you need to be visible. That's why visibility of your political or civil society position needs to be a part of this process. All the people who were talking about, freedoms during USSR period on the kitchens didn't produce solutions for that. But then when we became independent as Ukraine, as a state, we understood that if you will not be loud with your position, nobody will listen in you. And it doesn't matter who are going to what direction, in Moscow or in DC. It's matter what you are believing, what you are ready to fight in for, and what price you are ready to pay for that. Nobody wants to die on the streets, for sure. But I lost my colleague in 2014 in Maidan. He was one of that young, man who died and was shooted by law enforcement bodies when Yanukovych decided that this state needs to be broke, because he was already under the Moscow power for 100%. And if you want to know details, you can read many articles how this person had a meeting with Putin and what happened next, or unfortunately why our government did step back from European Association Agreement. And if you believe that Ukraine is a part of European region, you need to fight for these values, because it's not just about, to speak about that. It's about some active track. Civil society can replace even some weak institutions. I have to say that in 2022, when full-scale invasion was started, not many international partners decided to provide military and financial aid for Ukraine. Many of the intelligence services were waiting for 3 days, 1 week, few weeks, when Ukraine will be collapsed, Kyiv will be under the occupation, and Russia will have 100% of power here. And not so many partners provided military aid. It means that we had small post-Soviet Union army against big post-Soviet Union army. And this is very tricky gaming. But I have to say that we have now very, very powerful big foundations which doesn't have any relationship with international big institutions or donors, which are surviving and help to survive our nation and our army and our state. I have to say that we have such independent civil society foundation named Back Alive. So this foundation receiving and collecting money from private donors in Ukraine, outside of Ukraine. Many Ukrainians, spending just hundreds of hryvnias. It's very small amount of money from one independent donor, but at the end of the year, this foundation received more than billions of them. So, and after collapse of the US aid in Ukraine or somewhere else, I had a very small conversation with the representatives of this foundation, and they said that we didn't even had a feeling that there is a problem for our foundation, because less than 10% of resources were provided by internationals. So Ukrainians gave very small donations for one institution, independent foundation, civil society foundation, which procured the weapon for Ukrainian army. It means that the quality of the management, transparency of financial, reporting, good reputation of independent civil society foundation gave this institution a chance to provide military aid to its own army. Ukrainian army was a little bit more, prepared than our international partners. And I have to say that if you will open the website of this foundation, you will see how much Ukrainians spent their own hryvnias for this foundation just for military aid for armed forces of Ukraine. So we have already civil society defense minister. And this is not a fairy tale. Nobody can imagine in this world that civil society organization can provide military aid to its own army, not to Ukrainian army, official army. So I have to say that during all of these years when full-scale invasion happened, it was very difficult to have attention from the partners what has to be priority for supporting Ukraine, because there are so many directions like justice, accountability for Russia, war criminals who did awful things in Ukraine, to establish special trial against Putin and headquarters in Moscow because they violated international law and did crime of aggression. It's military aid from all sources and all countries. For example, Germany during the first weeks and months of full-scale invasion didn't provide a lot of support. But look what is happening now after their elections, because they can understand now that insecurity for Europe, it's not just about Ukrainian and Russian war. It's about our common problem, especially if US will exit from the Europe, because US will decide that this is our common responsibility now without their nuclear weapon umbrella and so on and so forth. And we see, the narratives, we saw the narratives before that civil society is so important that democratic countries and governments are listening what civil society in your country are thinking about reforms, anti-corruption activities, democracy, and so on and so forth. After full-scale invasion, me, my colleagues, some other women established even separate institutions which had one mission to advocate Ukrainian interests abroad. And we knocked 100 of doors of officials to talk directly from the voices of civil society to governors of these democratic states, because it's impossible to talk with authoritarian regimes like that, that if you will not help Ukraine, Ukraine will collapse, and then Russian army with Ukrainian men, which will be mobilized to that army, and children who will grow under the occupation will fight with you, against you, as it happening sometimes, few times during USSR period. That's why it's better to provide some technical support for Ukraine, like tanks, Leopards, F-16s, some other specific military aid which we need to protect our land, but first of all to protect our nation from occupation, because there is no worse scenario than to live under the occupation. We saw how it happening in Kievska Oblast, Zaporizhzhia Oblast, other lands where people were tortured, kidnapped, killed just because they had Ukrainian identity. And this is existential war for sure. And during this war, we have to be loud as civil society for sure. So financial independence, I provide you one example, but this is not just only one example in Ukraine. To be loud and to have, I don't know, enough braveness to talk with politicians which are speaking about themselves as democratic, to listen civil society, because we know more from the ground, from the grassroots level, what's happening in that community under the occupation, what's happening in that community near front line. And that voices helped us to have a status of candidate to EU. Because in June 2022, when two countries didn't voted for yet, had to be under the advertising from Ukrainian civil society or advocacy from Ukrainian civil society to listen in how this status will help Ukraine to provide more reforms, not just formally became a member of EU, but became in reality a part of European region, which will help us to have financial sustainability here or security together. And I believe it was successful. I had direct meetings with ministers of some of the states, not because they wanted to have it, but because we used that window of opportunity to talk directly during hot stage of the war, when they had to listen in us, because they provided many times statements that Ukrainian civil society does matter, and civil society does matter for, for some of the democratic governance. And I have to say that this is not a cheap price about everything. Some people who believe that Ukraine has to be under the Russia, that Ukraine can be independent, that Ukrainians doesn't have any, sovereign rights to decide who they are. We can speak with these people. It doesn't matter for us what they are thinking about Ukraine or about Ukrainian civil society. We have to speak with those who not determined yet, who are not caring, who are not reading news, who are not knowing the details about security, or how the scenarios about common security will look like if we will not do anything now. And for sure, the last point is about democracy. And this is very tricky topic for me, because I'm electoral expert, and I was advocating electoral reform for many, many years here with a huge success, especially in 2019, 2020s, we had good progressive reforms here. Now we are working on the track of EU accession process, and democratic institutions are a part of the fundamentals. That's why we are working on our reform hard. But during wartime, we can have elections. That's why we need to build a check and balance, even without formal electoral process. And that's why we, as representatives of civil society and NGOs, needs to provide expertise to those who are working on decision-making process, because they are not very aware about everything. Like Opora already working during last 2 years on preparation for post-war elections. It's about special legislation. It's about protection and defending our democracy from the external foreign influence, first of all, of Russia, because even if we will have ceasefire, it doesn't mean that our electoral process will be protected from Russia. They will pay money, they will use disinformation, propaganda, cyber attacks, and many other tools for, for doing chaos across Ukrainian elections. Mm-hmm. And that's why we are not just asking our parliament to do something or our partner to provide some technical support. We are proposing the articles or chapters for legislation, how it has to look like. If you want to have changes, you need to produce these changes by your hand. And then it will possibly will be more successful results at the end, because even parliamentarians don't have all the expertise in their hands. And if you, as representative of civil society, will not ask just doing something, but will put on the table solutions for that, like draft of the laws, expertise, data-driven analysis, evidences, it will be easily to have a common results. So my last point that I hope that Ukraine will be successful, but it doesn't mean that if today is not the best time for us. We are looking on news together, I believe so. I see how Europe is mobilizing, because what is happening now is not just about Ukraine. And I was talking about that for 3 years, that security, democracy, human rights, civil society activism, it's not just about one country. It's about common landscape, which will change to the, picture of, I don't know, Europe, early 13th, I'm speaking about 20th century, before Second World War. Or we will prevent together this scenario to build via building alliances of willing countries and willing nations to protect our values. That's it. Ukrainians are ready to continue fight. I hope that you are ready too. It was a great slogan of NATO during period of Cold War. Are you ready to fight tonight? So it means that everyone who are part of this network of civil society activists, human rights defenders, or doesn't matter, people of goodwill, need to understand that maybe tomorrow will not come if we will not be ready to fight tonight. So I hope that you still have optimistic view on the future, but our experience is more positive than negative. At the same time, it's about hard work on a daily basis. Nothing can protect us except us.
These words are really hard-hitting, and thank you both for your input. I think we have to rethink how we have been working and how we will have to change. And Olga, you said that you cannot tell us a fairy tale, but it is pretty inspirational what we have heard from both of you. So let me bring in Elliot Goat, my co-founder, who will help me navigate through the questions you are putting in the box. Please type your questions in. So we would like to make this as interactive as possible. But Elliot will kick off with a question first.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie, and thanks both Olga and Oleh for really inspiring insights and discussions. I suppose just before we open up to the rest of the group, I think obviously we're a very international audience, and you both have touched on this briefly. But I suppose, what would you say are the key lessons for civil society across Europe looking to shift more towards a sort of security focus? Ukrainian civil society has been forced to adapt very rapidly over the last 3 years and before that. So what is it that we can do to get ready and help others to get ready? And then a second question very briefly would be, what support can civil society in Europe give to Ukraine at this critical point? So I don't know who wants to take one of those.
Oleh?
I guess what we need now, what kind of help we can get from civil society in Europe, it's just spreading the word of truth. We are in the middle of very aggressive disinformation campaign, and one of our key allies, USA, joined this campaign on the new presidency. So when you hear fake statements from the US president or US vice president, when you hear fake accusation, like we waking up today, Olha was saying that we are daily getting news from abroad, shocking news. We have alarms because we are being attacked by drones and missiles every night. In the morning, we wake up to listen what's going on in Washington, and we are not less shocked by news coming from Washington because like today's Marco Rubio statement that there is a proxy war between Russia and USA, which makes us non-existent. It means it's not us fighting the war, we are just proxies. And challenges like that are everywhere. So if you can spread more objective information about the reason of this war, which is we have been attacked because we wanted to join family of free European nations. We refused to be colony of Moscow again. And this is the very reason why we are so hated and why we are attacked by Moscow. And this is not about threats from NATO. This is not about anything else. It's about this. Do have nations, European nations, do they have the right to choose their future, their course, way of life, or there are again kind of big empires trying to say less, smaller, less strong nations what they have to do. It's about new world order. The situation nowadays is about changing the way international law and justice was functioning. So probably my request to everybody who is in European countries who can provide this information, spread this information among citizens, this is extremely important. What kind of world we would like to live in.
Thank you.
Okay, I see so many questions, I don't know how to start, but I can say you, because there are a few mentions about international support and donors and funds, foundations which are not active anymore. I have to say that during this war, Ukrainian society spent their private money for security. And when elections will start, Opora will receive money from Ukrainian citizens for election observations. Because you mentioned here this question about potential monitoring and so on and so forth. I don't have any other potential successful scenario that Ukrainians will spend their time, their attention, their cars, their money for having as much free and fair elections as it possible. I saw that reaction of society in 2014 after when Yanukovych left Ukraine and we had elections in May 2014. I couldn't expect that our STO short-term observers will visit our trainings on very expensive cars, because there were many people who had a great careers and enough time and political will to spend their own money and resources and time for having as much good elections as it possible. And some of them knew me then as or came to our office as MPs. So after that first elections, where they spent their time for observation, independent observation, during next elections, some of them became MPs, parliamentarian. So it's mean how this, I have to say that this process is not so direct, that if donors, international organizations, USAID will not, exist after all of this chaotic work of new Trump's administration. So it means that Ukrainians are believed on themselves. So, and if you believe on yourself, it's better to have this scenario as a basical. Then you can have more, like we have now, from UK support, from EU support, and some other institutions. So, but this is super important to be enough independent even from different sources. I mentioned already one of this military civil society ministry. They didn't have and doesn't have any resources from international donors, and they are super successful because people believe that if they are spending money for having very important process like security and defend our land and people, they are ready to spend very small numbers. But when you have thousands of citizens who are ready to help you, it's about huge support.
Let me read Michael Angeloni's question, and there are two questions on Russian interference in Russian civil society, and I'll lump them together, but I'll first read Michael's question. I'm curious to hear if civil society as a whole has been more successful when working as a collective force, or if there is greater success when there is a clear leader among civil society organizations to provide guidance and take the lead?
So I can answer in different directions because both. There is no one formula for everything. In 2004, when we had Orange Revolution, and after what we established Opora as an organization, because I was a student which came to the street, being a member of Electoral Commission, fighting for having, accounting of the ballots without fraud. And so many of such people as me tried to build this democracy then, because it was a part of our DNA. But on those days, we had an idea that horizontal institutions like Opora and some other students' movement were very horizontal, will protect us from the external problems, like if government or law enforcement bodies will decide that this leader needs to go to the prison, then all of the institutions will be collapsed. But if you are speaking about movement like horizontal organization with many leaders, and few of them, even 5% of them, will be in prison, it doesn't mean that all movement will stop to work. So this is about resilience of institution, but we have to say that movements are not living for a long time. So this is about people's reaction on some of the action from other bad side. And this reaction can be sustainable or enough resilience if there are many leaders there. At the same time, when we are speaking about sustainable organizations, of course, leaders and their names have matter, because if, some of the partners know me personally for many years, and even if Russia will use and misuse the propaganda about me personally, or work of my organization and my colleagues' common activity, they will not believe on it. Because you have sustainable name, you have reputation already, and all people who want to know the truth about elections know that Opora will publish the statement about reality in the process. If the process will be against the best standards and democratic rules, we will say, no, we didn't have free and fair elections, as we did in 2010, as we did in 2012, and as such statements we had about local elections in 2021. At the same time, if you have a data about, results of the voting of people, then you can protect your statement and your reports and your position from disinformation, because your reality will be open, clear, and accountable. So that's why your question about leaders of civil society or networks have both answers. It's better to have visible leaders with very good reputation because they did a lot already. They already have this experience and background, which are protecting them and their institutions from disinformation. At the same time, it's better to have separately or together horizontal institutions because it will protect them from external pressure like your own government or foreign interference or something like that. And this is about resilience. So there are different systems which are working better or worse. But if different civil society groups will be like, couple in love, they can't watch on each other all the time, but they are looking on the same directions. So we have to have common values. And this is about the common directions. That's why different institutions can be successful and sustainable and work together, even in parallel manner, not together like one institution.
Couples in love.
I just can.
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
Couples in
just
love.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah, we when I resigned from the position of chief of staff to president and moved into civil society, I didn't believe in necessity to create my own NGO. So we started from having big coalition, like 70 NGOs, and the way we were acting, we were choosing. We had the common meeting, and we've been choosing a topic of the year, so to say, because I came from government. I know that sometimes they believe that civic activists, they're like a bit crazy. One day they do something in one direction, other day they run into another. It's chaotic. But those were the times of Yanukovych, and we decided really to unite our efforts, and we were finding common topics and successfully advocating it. So in times when there is a big threat for democracy, it's easier to unite and to have like a collective defense system. But at some point, specifically after last presidential elections, I realized that just advocacy is not enough, that the present government is very good at monitoring public opinion itself. They have number of creative directors. So if you would like to be heard, or if you would like to have a say on them, you must, because they listen to public opinion, you must compete with them by influencing the public opinion, by spreading the good analytical stuff among citizens. So we, in the last 5 years, we analyzed like 3,000 top decisions of government, president, and parliament, and explaining people what's right and what's wrong. And last comment, unfortunately, after 33 more years of independence, we still don't have party system in Ukraine. I was never party member myself, but I clearly know that civil society can do a lot, but they cannot take power. So my impression is that some active figures of civil society behave like they are government officials, but that's illusion. You cannot substitute government. You can have a say. Therefore, the way our government machinery is working is very, very serious problem, because we don't have balances of power, and therefore, if we are having our expectations from next name of the next president only without changing these balances of power, we'll be always disappointed.
Thank you. I'll lump together two questions on Russia. Ildiko and Imrich had a question on how do you counter Russian disinformation, and do you have any contact with civil society groups inside Russia? Do you cooperate at all?
I can say that I have contacts with them outside Russia. I attend international conferences where there are 3, 4, 5 top Russian representatives, but they are all government in exile. They all live in EU. They are former opposition or present opposition. And frankly, I don't know. And my organization or I personally don't have contacts within Russia because I believe that this is practically impossible to have this kind of contacts of somebody who is in Russia for a number of reasons. But even from my experience of talking to Russian opposition in exile, so to say, I am quite often very disappointed because they are united with one issue only. Putin unites them. They are all against Putin. But when we try to speak what will be after, they try to preserve same big imperialistic, chauvinistic Russia, but with different president.
So I had a long-term experience to cooperate somehow with Russian organizations, for example, Holos, but they are not in Russia now, and many of them left Russia some years ago. For those people who are in Russia, unfortunately, they don't have now any spirit to fight, and this is a motto of whole nation, unfortunately. And they lost their chance 12 years ago. So we have to understand that it's always about historical window of opportunity. They lost this window of opportunity, and that's why the collaboration with Russian civil society doesn't matter at all. And we are spending our time and lives for having some, successful results because we don't have any other choice or we will not survive. That's why collaboration with Russian civil society doesn't have any influence now. Some years ago, when we started our advocacy and knocked hundreds of doors in DC, Brussels, Paris, Berlin, and so on and so forth, I met many times in corridors, so-called Russian opposition. And unfortunately, they are so selfish and they fight it against sanctions, for example. So how we can find common solutions if we need to decrease the budget of Russia for war in Ukraine, and they are fighting against sanctions. And this is about their economy, sorry, but there is no other choice than to have less money for that. Now Russian budget spending more than 40% of state budget for war. And it doesn't matter what we are speaking about with Russian civil society abroad because they don't have any influence on their country. I'm in Kiev. I left my state for 6 months after full-scale invasion with my son. I was in shooting blacklist of Russians. You may know that they had such blacklist everywhere, even in villages, which was occupied. They had a list of those, for example, self-government bodies, representatives, mayors, activists, journalists, or those veterans of anti-terroristic operation, which were military from 2014, and they killed them in the first stage of this occupation for not having resilience. So I left my country. It was a little bit scared for me, but I back to home with my son then when I understood that Kiev will not be occupied, because it's not just my responsibility as activist or civil activist, but it's my responsibility as mother to save my child. So my husband became military. 4 men in my family are fighting as military now. And I have to say that those who are fighting for their democracy outside of the state will not be successful. So there is no other formula than to fight in your own country, for your own country. And this is my long answer to your short question about collaboration. There is no other choice than do not spend your life and time for useless processes, just to prioritize what you can change and do it hard on a daily basis. This is my last point.
Thanks, Olga. Yeah, so there's a question from Elaine Martinez, which is touching on some of the things we've already discussed. which is, do you know if the Ukrainian government has done or considered a massive awareness-raising campaigns, publicly on media, in the streets, to explain how Russian disinformation and propaganda works?
Well, I can say that there are a number of effective campaigns to which government is related, or maybe not related, but there is very popular. They came from initiative from civil society, like fake news. From what I can see from Ukrainian media, most of Ukrainian TV channels daily they just show and explain in very simple words fake news spread in Russia on what is happening in Ukraine. To what extent that is made by government or by TV, I don't know, but at least I can see that there is quite enough of basic explanation, like ABC of Russian disinformation campaign. It could be observed.
So I can answer that we won many Russian informational psychological operations here in Ukraine and in Europe, I believe so. It doesn't mean that everything are working very well, especially if social media and owners of social platforms now are not enough democratic. We have to say that Network X is not democratic anymore. There is no rules about truth. There is a right to spread the lie and to spread the disinformation without any outcome then. And the problem is that Ukrainian-based information has much more lower reactions or audience than pro-Russian now, because algorithms of this system and network is not working for democratic states. And the same may happen everywhere. Unfortunately, we have a problem with TikTok, you know about that, and how to fight against algorithms, nobody knows, especially if the owners of the social media have such policy and use these channels for their own financial or, power interest. It has to be managed somewhere, first of all, for us, European Union and this region, via institutions which still have a mandate for that. And when Telegram became black channel for recruiting the terrorists, selling the drugs, or to do the very bad things, and France, under which jurisdiction is Telegram and Durov, opened the criminal case and try to fix a little bit the rules against terrorism and drug selling and so on and so forth, it looks like it's working very well, because it's not about, right to speak loudly about your political position. It's about insecurity now, to have a clear rules and to have those who can, follow in it, and to, who can monitor how to follow in it by the owners and so on and so forth. I don't know if I'm clear enough, but I have to say that disinformation, it's not about one piece of news. It's about daily base waves. And there is no other option to fight effectively against disinformation than to build the rules. And this is about European Union, first of all. If European Union will be enough brave and to find correct solutions for the owners of social media, it will be easily to fight against Russian disinformation. In Ukrainian reality, we have very well-developed media organization, monitoring, watchdog organization, but the weakest side of this campaigning against disinformation, first of all, that we are living in post-truth world, and this is reality. Even in DC, there is a discussions who was Oleh Rybachuk, who was guilty on aggression. Ukraine and Russia, are you kidding us? Really? And there are people who believe that Earth is like that, like, you know, is doesn't have, sorry, my English is empty already because it was too difficult day. But I have to say that people believes in very strange stories, and disinfo are very well growing on this such platforms. That's why I don't believe that we can fight against disinformation just case by case. It's possible, but it will not prevent huge aggression and massive attacks against you as civil society representatives or NGOs or states or some narratives. We have to find systematic decision. And this is about, first of all, EU regulations, because truth has to have capacity to fight against post-truth reality.
Yeah, but but now truth is attacked by the largest democracy. G.D. Vance specifically attacks Europe for what he calls censorship and lack of freedom of speech, which is ridiculous. And he criticizes Romanian government for investigation against clearly Russian supported by fake news supported campaign candidate for presidency. He criticized, he supports alternative for Germany, ultra radical force. He supports all anti-European. He criticizes British government for lack of freedom. We have this crazy, really, I can understand that not only English words are missing, but it's just common sense missing. How world is changing, where it's not even post-truth, it's war is a peace kind of formula where we are living in, and it's much more difficult for Europeans actually to resist, because this is also crash test for European democracy, for our common values, and this is something we are much hoping we would be able to defend our right for freedom, for free speech, and not bend under huge pressure coming on us, on Ukraine, on Europeans, with those standards, with that very strange union between now Trump and Putin. It's a nightmare.
Okay, I am conscious of time because I know that it has been a really long day and a stressful couple of weeks. So if our guests are okay with it, we would extend the session by 5 minutes, if that's okay with you. But I wouldn't like to drag this on longer because I know it's been a really long day. Kester Eddie had a question on, I do not hear anything in the first year of the war. As I remember, the government put a lot of effort to invite Russian soldiers to surrender. I do not hear anything about this now. Has this effort died very quickly? Oleh?
Me? Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, from my point of view, it hasn't died, because from news we are getting in, there is this campaign convincing Russians to surrender, to save their life. It goes online. There are leaflets spread by drones, and we see lots of evidence where actually Russian soldiers are choosing to surrender than to die in stupid attacks. So my impression is that this campaign didn't stop.
Okay. As I
And the last
know,
question.
yeah.
Go ahead, Olga.
No, I agree with Oleh. It's not so visible, but the surrender process is still ongoing, but it's not so massive. First of all, because it's very bloody stage of the war. Sometimes there is no opportunity to go through the line at all, especially from Russian side, because they are killing themselves. They are killing their soldiers, as it was during, USSR experience. how to fight better, because, you know, if you are not moving forward, you will be killed by your own colleagues. And the same is happening with Northern Korean soldiers, you know, that they have a special equipment for self-destroying, because this is about the security of their families. We don't have details for sure about Northern Korean internal situation, but this is not just about people's will. This is about reality. All the soldiers from that side are not very valued for their state.
And a very short closing question to Olga. What would be the challenges of election monitoring if there were elections? Oh, Olga, you muted yourself?
Yeah, sorry. I think that the biggest challenge will be not just security, because I don't want to talk about security. We need to be enough protected from some external threats, but sometimes it's impossible. That's why we need to invest money for having HITS training, first aid, medical aid training for observers, or their self-protection equipment, insurance, and so on and so forth. But this is about technicalities. I have to say that if the truth about elections will not be visible for other societies, we will not have, you know, enough power for new elected bodies from other side, because Russia will destroy the reputation of elections if we will not have trustful local, domestic, and independent missions. I believe that OSCE ODIHR will have a huge problem with that, because Russia cut the budgets for OSCE ODIHR as an institution from 2021, and there are Russians there, there are Belarus representatives there, and this organization will have a huge problem for deploying the mission or fundraise resources for that. And they will not be 100% independent. That's why I'm calling to other partners to think that EU, Council of Europe, NATO may have joined European mission, because EU usually has missions on Africa, Middle East, somewhere else. Why not in Ukraine? We need check and balance system even in between missions. So the main challenges for observation will be, first of all, security, then independency of these missions from Russian influence.
Thank you. All right, so thank you so much. We really appreciate your input, and this is a very challenging time for all of us. So I hope we're able.
Sorry, but Ulvi is here, and he hands up the hand. So I have to ask to give him a chance to talk, because he is a deputy head of electoral department of OSCE ODIHR. Ulvi, I'm happy to see you here.
The floor is yours, Ulvi.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for noticing my hand, and for being a real Democrat and opening the floor for the different perspective that I would like to bring to this discussion. I mean, first of all, many thanks to Oleh and Olga. I listened to your presentations. What you do is really admirable, and your work in different fields is a source of inspiration. And I speak from my heart, and it's something that I truly believe in. I just wanted to come in with a very short remark concerning Olga's last statement. And of course, Olga, as her perception and her view on things, it is true that Russian Federation, Belarus, they are part of OSCE. There are participating states, just as other 55, altogether 57 participating states in OSCE. She's also absolutely correct, suggesting that the last approved unified budget dates back to 2021. And it is true that for years, this election department, which belongs to the independent autonomous institution of OSCE, has been experiencing severe budgetary constraints. It is true. To address the budgetary constraints in the context of possible potential deployment or observation of first post-war elections in Ukraine, we do our bit to think about creative ways to making sure that we do have budget in place to afford an operation that will be of the scale and of the challenge that we haven't experienced before. But having said that, yes, the Russian Federation is part of the organization, but they have no influence on how we do our work and on our assessments in particular. We have credible observation methodology, which was proven and is in place for almost 3 decades of observation across OSCE region. And when it comes to technicalities, no one has an interference or involvement in what we do and how we produce our reports. Now, the question of involvement of our international actors and partners in the observation, that is in fact happening always. And whenever we observed in Ukraine, for example, we always had partners from European Parliament, Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE, Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Parliamentary Assembly of the NATO, joining together and presenting a joint assessment of the electoral process that we observed. So with that, again, recognizing that Oleh may have her own perception, I have to do my bit to present the way how we see things, and it's not just a statement of a bureaucrat sitting in Warsaw, but like really a person who observed elections back in 2004 when Orange Revolution took place, and who is willing to and hopes to observe first post-war elections in Ukraine when they are held on Ukraine's terms, when there is a just and lasting peace in the country, and where the country is prepared to deliver democratic process as it's known for.
Thank you, Ulvi and Olga, for pointing out.
Thank you, Ulvi. I have to say, within all of this audience, that I love what OSCE ODIHR did many times in Ukraine. But there is a challenges of that Russia will try to destroy some other organizations, not only yours. And because of their power inside the OSCE, they will try to do like that. That's why I have to say that we are welcoming all international trustful missions, and I hope that OSCE will be here. I'm sure that Ukrainian state will not invite Russian citizens as observers, and Belarus citizens too. This is our right to react somehow on the aggression, because you mentioned that this is happening here in this region in the first time after big Second World War. And this is new reality. At the same time, I promote the idea to have other missions just for security, because if you will be alone here as international voice, it will be insecure for you, because OSCE will be under the bigger pressure than if it will be, one voice about rules from EU, Council of Europe, and OSCE ODIHR side. This is about security.
Oleg, I need to ask you if you want to add anything to this? Otherwise, I will close the
No, no.
session.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you for organizing this. We hope we'll be helpful at least to explain how we feel and in what atmosphere we live.
Thank you, Oleh Rybachuk, Olga Ivazovska, and thank you to our audience, Agot, our interpreter, and glory to Ukraine, Slava Ukraini.
Героям
Героям
слава.
слава.
Thank you, all of you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.